Hello everyone, I'm still Linking X2 and this is part 2 of our stage 1 in draft preparations. Today we're going over a real life example where I have prepared something prior to a draft, and yeah, that is the draft in the LCK playoff semi-final between T1 and GenG. So this is not about a perfect draft, this is not about something like that, we're not blame seeking either or anything like that. We're talking about a real life example where I will imply the steps of part 1 that we have learned, and then we see how useful they can become and can lead us to successful drafts. So with that out of the way, let's get right into it. So in the first step, we talk about the meta. In this case, the teams have already played a bunch on this patch, but we can look into the playoffs to find out the priorities about some champions here. So 100% Big Ben, Gnar, Hecarim, Seraphine, Senna and the Thresh. So yeah, that's quite interesting. We see that for each role there's a champion that is 100% Big Ben, so there's high priority on this one exact pick for each position. If we look at the highest win rate, again excluding 1 and 2 offs, Udyr with 83.3%, Castelliona with 75%, and then Gnar, Renekton, Braum and Nidalee with 66.7%. Yeah, someone pass me that copium. Oof. So our next step will be the scouting. We obviously don't have intel about scrims, but we can look at the solo queue accounts of the players and what they have picked up in the LCK spring split so far. And there we see quite the difference. But yeah, looking at the solo queue games first, we see quite a few interesting things. Not going over everything, of course, but yeah, for example, the top laners have prioritized Gnar counters with Akali and Irelia. T1 is seemingly preparing flex picks in top and mid with the Akali and the Silas. The AD carries, they have picked up champions that do quite well into Kai'Sa, who is a priority pick for both AD carries, as she's their most played for this year. And then yeah, the supports try out a few more unconventional picks. So yeah, we see they are preparing quite a lot in solo queue. If we're looking at the LCK split champions, we see nothing too out of the ordinary here. They have not really deviated too much from the meta. Maybe a noteworthy example that doesn't fit that would be this set for live. So that's a special champion that he has in his repertoire. And similarly, Seraphine for Faker, something that BDD has not played at all. So with this scouting information, we can look at potential matchups that might happen, and we can begin with the next step, the theory crafting and the strategies. So in the following step, strategies, you and your team then have to talk about the champions, champion matchups, and whole team comp identities. So I've picked out a few examples what you could talk about here. Obviously there is an abundance of stuff that has to be covered, but yeah, not boring you with all of that. Gnar, for example, here as a top lane topic, he can be somewhat of a trap, right? So he has high priority, especially for Kana, but there are champions that counter him, and hard counters like Irelia and Akali are being prepared. Then Hecarim counters on the other side. Clit has preparing some of these. The problem is here that they might not be too relevant in the grand scheme of things, while they may beat Hecarim pre-6. After that, if the team is not really playing around them, they will fall off, right? Olaf and Volibear, they're not really online with how GenG approaches games. Another step about the game approach from GenG is the mid lane champion pool. So BDD often plays these control mages, but he's playing damage champions. So he's not playing Seraphine, a more supportive champion, and he seemingly has not picked her up in the 2 weeks. But this is also a mind game where T1 can't be too sure about that. So yeah, that's something to be worried about. The concept of shared champion pools here being the key point. Another key is the bot lane matchup. So in my opinion, the matchup down there is the way that GenG can use to win the game. And there are quite a lot of things going on down there. Senna Varus dynamic, if Ruler has played Varus a bit. Senna then also having the advantage of enabling supports, and area with Tahm Kench, for example, or live with his key pick the set. Then these champions can then impact the other matchups way more because they suddenly get abundance of gold. Then I mentioned the Kai'Sa being high priority pick for both of them, Jhin and Ashe being prepared as counters. And yeah, for this last step, I have also to mention that these counters and strategies, they should not exist only in isolation. What do I mean with this? So if Jhin is then elected as a counter to Kai'Sa, a lane counter, there are many problems with that. So Jhin is not really good against tanks. Jhin is also not really good against hard engage. Obviously Jhin, in my opinion, is not a good champ in the meta at all. He's not really good with most team comps and not good against others, and he doesn't really have items. But putting that aside, what I mean to say here is that even though your counter in isolation may make sense, right, with the Olaf into Hecarim for example, but in the grand scheme of things you have to consider the team playstyle, and obviously also the other champions that can be elected. Then in terms of counter picks, you might begin to circle around. What do I mean with that? Let's look at the combat triangle in top lane. So Gnar being countered by Irelia, but Irelia being kind of countered by Sion, for example, a tank. But then Sion is also being countered by Gnar. So you have this rotation, right? Combat triangle. So in your planning, you might circle around. So if I pick this, then they pick that, then I pick that, right? You're getting nowhere. But if you have thought out the whole continuation of the circle, then in this rock, paper, scissors scenario, in the actual draft, you know what the correct answer will be to punish the enemy's mistakes. So in the draft, obviously, they kind of have to show if they're using rock, scissor, or paper, one of the three options, at least at some point. And then you have made up your mind. You can then select the counter that is most fitting and are not surprised and have to think about what would be the right approach and the right counter for this individual matchup here. So to be honest, that is most you can do in preparations for now. You can plan matchups, even team-wide answers, or go into nitty-bitty things like pathing and items and rotations that you're going to do in the game to punish champions or team decisions. Well, in the actual draft, that is the baseline of this, it will probably never go as planned. There are just too many choices the enemy can make to throw you off guard. But if you have prepared adequately, the chances of then being caught off guard by a curveball by the enemy, or simply electing something that can be punished very hard, or that is not really punishing enough against the enemy champions, will be significantly decreased. And I think another great advantage of this strategy meeting and like planning with your team will be that the overall game sense and overall game knowledge will be heightened through these discussions, because you begin to think about stuff that you might not have thought about in the first place. So that's another added advantage of this preparation period. Now with the planning out of the way, you have a good grasp about what the enemy prioritizes and how they approach pick ban and the game overall. If you have their habits online, you can maybe try to simulate a draft. You have to know this is not a perfect solution and you can't expect the draft to go all 100% of that. But with simulated drafts, you can try and then in retrospect look, is your strategy even approachable? Is it even doable? And then if you think these drafts are then kind of good, you can actually also try these out. If you have a 10-man roster or something like that, or in scrims, you can ask the enemy to play these champions if you ask nicely. So that's also a way where you can find some extra practice against champions that the enemy is very likely going to play, and in the right coordination. So here I have prepared a bit of a simulated draft between GenG and T1. It's not perfect, that's not what the simulation is for. Again, you try to figure out the habits of the enemy and then approach them realistically. Banning out enemy comfort picks, for example, on blue side. Banning OP or very important champions on the other side. Then T1's habit of banning Udyr on red side. Picking overpowered or high priority champions. Champions that you have prepared to flex in multiple positions. Faker's habit of picking his champion early to get better matchup for his teammates. Then picking champions that are on theme with each other, right? very much straightforward. And yes, Orianna, for example, would not be the prior pick that BDD is playing the most. It's only his third most champion in comparison to the Syndra, for example. But obviously you have to figure out champions that work well with each other, yeah, more so. Ezreal here being then online with his teammates, answering enemy comp as well. Also one of the champions Teddy has played in the past, so that's also quite good. And it can also function as a pick away from Ruler in this scenario. Then in the next ban fate, you ban out champions that are potential counters to your champions in different stages of the game, right? In the early stages here. On the other side, you ban out AD carries that would do well against Ezreal and work well with Rel, right? It's just one approach. Again, I mentioned that in my opinion, the bot lane is the key matchup, so securing a good matchup for Teddy is quite good here, quite important. Then, well, you lose the flex of this champion. I mean, he could go in support, but yeah, electing a jungler that is equal in clear speed and also like fits the theme of the rest of their champions. While Cass has not played too much Lilia lately. Then Ashe going about equal into Ezreal and can even offer more pick potential, and also can play quite safely in the bot line. And with the E, he can help Hecarim get like edges in the jungle matchup as well. And yeah, Ruler's Ashe, I mean, people should know about that. Then Cho'Gath here, decent into the Gragas matchup, which they might presume here Gragas top instead of Gragas support. But can also, yeah, follow up on their other champions. And Orianna Cho'Gath is a combination GenG has used in the past to win against Damwon Kia. Cho'Gath also a high comfort pick for Rascal. Then T1 here revealing the Gragas as a support champion. Also a good matchup into Rel. Also a good matchup into Ashe. Then he can also peel very nicely against Cho'Gath, Red and Orianna. Similarly, Gangplank with his ultimate can also do the similar things here against Ashe and Orianna. Gangplank obviously a very overpowered top laner at the moment. He can do very much against a multitude of champions and has very little hard counters if you at least play him correctly. Then obviously, just to mention it again, everything here for T1 is on theme, and that's the same thing for GenG. So we have a team comp that is on theme. Both teams have stable lanes, right? White elements is what we identified as stable, and we can find that in every lane in some capacity. And then again mentioned team coordination and the team cohesion, right? Every champion has to link up with each other. So that's also what we have here. And then again, these are not like random champions that I'm just betting them play. These are champions they have played in the past, practiced in solo queue, or are overall accustomed to them. This is obviously one out of a multitude of examples of simulated drafts, but this is something that you can come up with players and then like, look at edges or like errors, right? This is always something that can be punished harder. Similarly, being like banning Gnar and like losing a ban here, it can also be punished, and so on, right? Picking support early. This is the thing, you are going to make mistakes, and drafts are not usually perfect unless the enemy helps you. But you have to understand that you will always do mistakes. You can look at the drafts that you prepare and think about, and yeah, figure out where you could get more edges, or you weed out errors where the enemy could punish you. But you have to understand these drafts then are only examples, tests. No matter how much you prepare, you should never have the expectation that you will 100% predict what the enemy will do and find a perfect answer to that draft that the enemy will do, because that's not going to be the case. And if you fail to understand that concept in the actual draft, when the enemy does something that you don't expect, you will have a shit ton of problems, because you have not prepared adequately enough to have a wide variety of options for the spectrum of champions or strategies that the enemy might use against you. So with this, we have now theorized, planned, prepared and trained our champion pool. Our gear is now ready for the real deal, but that will obviously be the next stage. So yeah, subscribe if you don't want to miss it. And if you liked what you saw and heard, maybe consider giving this video a thumbs up, would be really helpful from you. So that's it for today, and great luck on the Rift. Till next one.